The rain was hammering against the windshield when Jessica pulled her white Tesla into the parking lot of Meadowbrook Senior Living in North Vancouver. I sat in the passenger seat, my small suitcase in the trunk, watching the building loom closer through the street glass. Gray concrete walls, cheap vinyl siding trying to look like wood, and a faded sign that promised dignified living for your loved ones. My loved ones were currently in the front seat, arguing about parking fees. "Just park it yourself, Jess," my son Bradley said, without looking up from his phone. "It's $2 cheaper." "It's pouring rain?" Jessica shot back, her voice tight. "Your father is 65 years old. He shouldn't be walking through a storm." "He's got an umbrella?" I didn't have an umbrella. It was sitting in the front closet of my house in West Vancouver, the house where I'd lived for 32 years, the house where my wife Eleanor and I had raised Bradley, the house I'd signed over to my son 3 years ago, because he'd looked me in the eyes and promised, "You'll always have a home with us, Dad, always." That promise lasted exactly as long as it took for Jessica to realize she was stuck living with her elderly father-in-law. Jessica parked as far from the entrance as possible, and we ran through the rain. "Well," they walked briskly. I shuffled, my arthritis making each step painful, my hips screaming with every movement. Inside, the smell hit me immediately. Boiled vegetables, industrial cleaner, and something else I couldn't quite name. Defeat, maybe. A woman in her 40s with an aggressive smile approached us. "You must be the Carters. I'm Brenda, the intake coordinator. Welcome." Bradley shook her hand. Jessica hung back, checking her phone, her designer coat dripping water onto the worn linoleum. "Let's get you settled, Mr. Carter," Brenda said, leading us down a hallway painted in that particular shade of beige that screamed institutional neglect. "You'll be in room 24B. You'll have a roommate. George, lovely man, very quiet. Stroke victim, so he doesn't talk much." "Dad won't mind," Jessica said before I could respond. "He's not very social, anyway." That wasn't true. I'd been social. I'd had a poker group that met every Thursday. I'd volunteered at the Maritime Museum, teaching kids about naval engineering. But Jessica had systematically eliminated all of that over the past 2 years. The poker buddies were too stressful for me. The museum was too far. After she took my car keys, claiming I'd run a stop sign I definitely hadn't run. Room 24B was smaller than my garden shed. 2 narrow beds, 2 dressers, 1 bathroom, and a window overlooking the parking lot where Jessica's Tesla sat gleaming in the rain. George was in the other bed, either sleeping or unconscious. His breathing was raspy, mechanical. "Perfect," Bradley said, glancing around for maybe 3 seconds. "This is great, Dad. You'll be happy here." I looked at my son, really looked at him. When had he become this stranger in a $2,000 custom suit? Who could dump his father in a room with a stroke victim and call it perfect? "Bradley, can we talk? Just the 2 of us?" Jessica's head snapped up from her phone. "About what?" "About whether this is really necessary. I'm 65, not 95. I can still take care of myself." "Dad." Bradley's voice took on that patient tone people use with difficult children. "We've discussed this. You left the stove on twice last month. You forgot your medication. You fell in the bathroom." The stove incident happened because Jessica called me mid-cooking, panicking about a work deadline, demanding I find a document in Bradley's office immediately. The medication I forgot was a prescription Jessica filled without telling me, switching my regular pills. The bathroom fall? Someone left a wet towel on the floor, but I didn't say any of this. 3 years living with Jessica had taught me that contradicting her was pointless. "How much does this place cost?" I asked instead. "Don't worry about that," Jessica said quickly. Too quickly. "I'd like to know." Brenda consulted her tablet. "Meadowbrook's monthly rate is $4,200, which includes meals, basic care, and activities. Medication management and special medical needs are additional. $4,200 a month. My pension was $2,100. The savings Eleanor and I had accumulated were mostly gone, eaten up by her cancer treatments, then by 3 years of contributing to household expenses while living with Bradley and Jessica. "How will we pay for this?" I asked. "We'll figure it out," Bradley said, not meeting my eyes. That's when I knew. They weren't planning to pay. They expected me to somehow cover it, and when I couldn't, they'd let me get evicted. I'd seen it happen to Eleanor's father. Nursing home couldn't get payment. Elderly resident gets shuffled to cheaper facilities until they end up in some government warehouse just waiting to die. Maybe you've been in a situation where people you trusted showed you who they really were. It's a shock that hits harder than any physical pain. "I need some air," I said. I walked out of room 24B, down that beige hallway, past Brenda's concerned expression, and out into the rain. Behind the building was a small courtyard with concrete benches and struggling shrubs. I sat down, let the rain soak through my shirt, and pulled out my phone. Not the ancient flip phone Bradley and Jessica knew about. That one was in my pocket. But I had another phone, a smartphone I'd bought 2 years ago. When I realized what Jessica was doing, I opened my banking app and stared at the screen. $7,847,392.67. Eleanor and I hadn't been wealthy, but we'd been smart. In the 1980s and 90s, when Vancouver real estate was affordable, we bought properties. Small houses, nothing flashy. We rented them out, maintained them carefully, never touched the income. For 30 years, we built a portfolio. When Eleanor died 4 years ago, she left everything to me. We'd planned to tell Bradley eventually, set up a trust, make sure our son was taken care of. But then I started living with Bradley and Jessica, and I watched Jessica go through my mail, hunting for bank statements that didn't exist because I'd moved everything to paperless. I watched her forge my signature on documents. I watched her isolate me from my friends, monitor my calls, convince Bradley that his father was losing his mind. So I stayed quiet, played the confused old man, and documented everything, every forged signature, every manipulation, every lie. I pulled up my contacts and called the one person who knew the truth. William. Marcus Chen's voice was warm, concerned. He'd been Eleanor's estate attorney, helped us build our property empire. "How are you holding up?" "I'm sitting in the rain behind Meadowbrook Senior Living, Marcus. Jessica just checked me in." A pause. "Are you ready then?" "I'm ready." "I'll start the paperwork. Come to my office Monday morning, 10 a.m. We'll make this official." I hung up and sat in the rain for a few more minutes. Then I went back inside. Bradley and Jessica were in the lobby, both looking annoyed. "There you are," Jessica said. "We need to leave. I have a meeting." The drive back took 35 minutes. Bradley dropped me off without getting out of the car, and Jessica walked me to the door. "Your medications," she said, handing me a plastic bag. "Take them on schedule." Then her voice dropped. "And William, we need to know where your money is. We checked several banks. Nobody has accounts in your name." There it was, the real reason for all this. "I don't have any money, Jessica. Eleanor's medical bills, the funeral, 3 years of expenses. It's all gone." Her eyes narrowed. "Your pension alone should have left you savings." "Life is expensive." She studied my face, trying to read me. I kept my expression neutral, helpless, the confused old man she thought I was. "This place needs payment in 2 days," she said. "Figure something out." She got back in the Tesla and drove away. That night, I lay in bed listening to George's raspy breathing and someone crying down the hall. I thought about Eleanor, how she'd looked at me 3 days before she died, her hands so thin in mine. "Take care of Bradley," she'd whispered. "He's all we have." I'd promised I would, but I never imagined I'd need to protect my son from himself. I pulled out my smartphone one more time and texted Marcus. Monday, 10 a.m. Let's change everything. His response came immediately. Eleanor would be proud of what you're about to do. I looked over at George, lost in whatever remained of his life, then at the window where rain streaked down the glass. This wasn't the ending I'd imagined, but it wasn't over yet. Jessica thought she'd won, thought she'd disposed of the inconvenient old man, and could now enjoy the house she'd coveted for years. She had no idea what was coming. If you've ever felt invisible to people who should love you most, you know that hollow ache in your chest. But sometimes, being underestimated is the greatest advantage you can have. The first week at Meadowbrook was exactly what you'd expect from a place where people go to be forgotten. Terrible food served at rigid intervals. Activity programs designed for dementia patients. Bingo at 2 p.m. Chair yoga at 4 p.m. George never woke up long enough to acknowledge I existed. The night staff were overworked and underpaid, doing their best with impossible circumstances. I played my part perfectly, attended the activities, smiled at other residents, pretended to be grateful, and I documented everything with my hidden smartphone, not to sue Meadowbrook, but to have a record of exactly where my son had put me. Bradley called once that first week, Wednesday evening, just before dinner. "Hey, Dad, how's it going?" "It's fine, son, taking some adjustment, but everyone's nice." "That's great." The relief in his voice was palpable. He wanted permission to feel good about abandoning me. Jessica and I were thinking we'd visit this weekend. They didn't come. Saturday arrived, and I sat in the common room, watching families visit their loved ones, children running around despite the quiet please signs, grandchildren bringing flowers and homemade cookies. I sat alone, playing solitaire with cards so worn you could identify them from the back. At 3 p.m., a text arrived. "Sorry, Dad, something came up. Next weekend for sure." Something came up? Jessica's Instagram. Yes, I followed her on a fake account, showed them at a winery in Okanagan, wine glasses raised, her caption reading, "Finally a kid-free weekend. Hashtag self-care. Hashtag marriage goals." I was the kid they needed a break from. The bill arrived Monday morning. Brenda delivered it personally. Her cheerful demeanor strained. "Mr. Carter, I need to set up automatic payment. Your banking information?" I fumbled with my flip phone, playing confused. "Oh, I thought Bradley was handling that. Could you call him?" She made the call. I watched her expression shift from professional to concerned. Multiple calls followed. 20 minutes later, she returned. "Your son says you should have funds to cover this. Your pension and savings?" "My pension is $2,100 monthly. This place costs $4,200. I let my voice shake. Bradley said he'd handle it. He promised. Her smile was cracking. "I'll speak with billing. We'll work something out." By Wednesday, Jessica showed up alone. No Bradley. Just Jessica in her Canada Goose jacket, looking like she'd rather be anywhere else. "William, we need to talk about your finances." We sat in a small conference room reeking of stale coffee. She spread documents on the table like evidence. "Bradley and I have been very generous. We let you live rent-free for 3 years. Fed you, took care of you. The least you can do is pay for this place." "I don't have the money, Jessica. Impossible." She leaned forward. "Your pension over 3 years is $75,000. Eleanor's life insurance was $50,000. Where did it go?" "Medical bills, funeral expenses, living costs." I kept my voice innocent, helpless. "Payment is due in 2 days, or you're out." "Out? Where would I go?" "That's your problem, William." She stood, gathering her papers. "And don't think about coming back to our house. We've converted your basement room into a home gym." After she left, I sat staring out at her Tesla in the parking lot. Then I pulled out my smartphone and texted Marcus. "She's pushing hard. Tomorrow?" His response, 10 a.m., bring everything. That night I couldn't sleep. George's breathing was irregular, mechanical. Someone down the hall was crying or screaming. Hard to tell. The night staff didn't notice or care. I thought about Eleanor in the hospital, 3 days before she died, her hand cold in mine. "Take care of Bradley," she'd whispered. "He's all we have." I'd promised. But how do you take care of someone from themselves? Thursday morning, I told Brenda I had a doctor's appointment. She looked skeptical, but couldn't stop me. I called an Uber on my smartphone, met the driver at the back entrance, and 40 minutes later, sat in Marcus Chen's Gastown office. The office was small but elegant, wood-paneled walls lined with law books, a window overlooking Water Street. Marcus sat behind his desk, reading glasses perched on his nose. "William," he stood, shook my hand. "You look terrible." "I feel terrible." "Good. Use that." He gestured to the chair. "I've prepared everything, but I need to ask one more time. Are you absolutely certain?" I thought about Bradley as a little boy, running to me crying when he fell off his bike. The teenager who stayed up all night with me when Eleanor's father died. The young man who promised through tears at his mother's funeral that we'd face everything together. Then I thought about the man who put me in Meadowbrook and drove away. I'm certain. For 3 hours we went through everything. Marcus had done meticulous work. The 12 rental properties scattered across Vancouver, Burnaby, and Richmond were being transferred into an irrevocable charitable trust. Beneficiaries: Vancouver Food Bank, BC Cancer Research Foundation, and a scholarship fund in Eleanor's name for low-income engineering students. The 2 commercial office buildings in New Westminster went into a separate trust funding affordable housing initiatives. My investment portfolio, accumulated over 35 years, would split 2 ways. Half would establish a support fund for elderly people trapped between facilities they couldn't afford and inadequate government care, people exactly like those I'd met at Meadowbrook. The other half, $3.9 million, would go to Daniel. Daniel, Bradley's 17-year-old son from his first marriage, living in Victoria with his mother Rebecca. Bradley saw him maybe twice a year, always with excuses about work, distance, Jessica's discomfort with blended families. But I'd stayed in touch. Secret Sunday evening calls when Jessica thought I was napping. Birthday cards sent to Rebecca's address. Christmas presents. Bradley knew nothing about. Daniel was a good kid. Smart. Kind. Working part-time at a marina while studying for engineering entrance exams. He wanted to be a naval architect, just like his grandfather. The trust has conditions, Marcus explained. Daniel receives the money at 25, assuming he completes university and maintains community service. Until then, it covers education and living expenses. And Bradley? Marcus pulled out one more document. Bradley gets the house. That's it. West Vancouver property. Current value approximately $3.2 million. The house I'd bought in 1991 for $340,000, where I'd taught Bradley to swim, where Eleanor planted her rose garden, where we'd celebrated every Christmas and birthday for decades. The only thing I was leaving him. "There's your statement," Marcus said, handing me a document. "Read at the will reading, explaining your decisions." I read slowly. "To my son Bradley, I leave you the house in West Vancouver. This is not punishment, it is reflection. You already took this house from me when you allowed your wife to systematically isolate, manipulate, and dispose of me. Now it's legally yours. I hope every room reminds you of the father you abandoned, and I hope someday you become the man your mother believed you were." I signed everything. Marcus witnessed, notarized, filed electronically. By 2 p.m., it was done. My entire $7.8 million estate had been restructured. Legally, irrevocably, final. "They'll contest," I said. "Let them." Marcus smiled grimly. "This will is bulletproof. We have your medical evaluations. 3 doctors certified you cognitively sound. We have documentation of Jessica's manipulation. We have her own social media posts complaining about taking care of you. And William, You have the legal right to leave your estate to anyone you choose. What about Bradley's claim? In BC, children can contest if inadequately provided for. But Bradley already has a $3.2 million house. No judge will override your wishes when you've provided substantial inheritance. I took a cab back to Meadowbrook. Arriving before dinner, Brenda intercepted me in the lobby. "Mr. Carter, about payment. The bill is due tomorrow, and I understand, Brenda. I'll figure something out. If we don't receive payment by 5 p.m. tomorrow, we'll have to ask you to leave." "Where would I go?" She looked genuinely distressed. "Social services might help, but there's usually a waiting list. Do you have family?" I almost laughed. "No, I don't have family." That night I packed my small suitcase. Not back to Bradley's. I'd rather sleep on the street. I checked into a modest North Vancouver hotel. Nothing fancy, just a clean room, a bed, and dignity. I ordered room service, first time in years, and sat by the window watching city lights reflect off Burrard Inlet. My phone rang. Bradley. "Dad," the nursing home called. "They said you're being evicted? They need payment. I don't have it." "Where are you?" "I'm fine, Bradley." "Dad, tell me where you are. We need to talk." "Do we?" Bitterness crept into my voice. "You haven't wanted to talk for 3 years. You wanted an easy conscience while your wife erased me." "That's not fair." "You didn't visit me once, Bradley. Not once. You dumped me there and drove away." Silence. Then, "I've been busy with work, and Jessica said visitors would stress you." "And you believed her. You chose to believe her. Over your own father." I stared at the water. "You know what breaks my heart. Not that she manipulated you, but that you let her." "Where are you?" "We need to discuss your finances. Jessica says you've been hiding money." There it was. Not concern for my well-being, just money. "Good night, Bradley." I hung up, blocked his number. Then I called the one person who deserved to know. "Grandpa?" Daniel's voice was surprised, happy. "You're calling early." I told him everything. The nursing home, the eviction, his father's abandonment. Then I told him about the will, the trust, the money he'd inherit. He was quiet for a long time. "Grandpa, I don't want money. I want you to be okay." "I am okay, Daniel. Better than okay. I'm finally free." "What do you mean?" "Visit me this weekend. I'll explain everything. And Daniel, your grandmother would be so proud of you." After we hung up, I sat in that hotel room feeling lighter than I had in years. Tomorrow, Meadowbrook would officially evict me. Bradley and Jessica would panic, and eventually they'd discover the truth. But tonight, I was just a 65-year-old man in a hotel room, finally free. My phone buzzed. Marcus. "Jessica's lawyer just contacted me about your estate. They're digging." "Ready for what comes next?" I typed back. "More ready than they are." Maybe you know that feeling when you've been pushed to your limit and finally pushed back. It's terrifying and liberating at the same time. I was about to find out just how liberating it could be. The call came exactly 5 days later. I was having breakfast with Daniel at a cafe on Granville Island. When my flip phone rang, Bradley's number, "Dad." His voice was tight, controlled, dangerous. "We need to meet, today. It's about your estate." "My estate?" I kept my voice confused. "Bradley, I don't have an estate. I told you." Cut the act. For the first time in years, I heard real emotion, pure rage. Marcus Chen sent us documents, properties, investments, millions of dollars, Dad. Millions. Across the table, Daniel's eyes widened. I put a finger to my lips. "I'd like my lawyer present for this conversation," I said calmly. "Your lawyer? Your lawyer just destroyed our family." "No, Bradley, you did that, when you put me in Meadowbrook and drove away." Silence. Then, 3 o'clock, Marcus Chen's office. Be there." He hung up. Daniel stared at me, a mixture of awe and concern on his face. "Are you sure about this, Grandpa?" "More sure than I've ever been about anything in my life." At 2:55 p.m., Marcus and I walked into his conference room. Bradley and Jessica were already there, with a man I didn't recognize. Expensive suit, shark smile. Their lawyer. Dad! Bradley stood up, and for a moment I saw confusion, hurt, anger warring on his face. Is it true? Do you really have $7.8 million? Had, I corrected, sitting down across from them. Past tense. Jessica's face was pale, her hands trembling on the table. You lied to us. You pretended to be broke. You made us think. I made you think exactly what you wanted to think, Jessica. That I was a helpless old man with nothing, that you could take my house, my dignity, my life, and face zero consequences. We didn't take anything, Bradley's voice rose. You signed the house over voluntarily, because you promised I'd always have a home with you. You lied. Marcus opened his briefcase, withdrew documents, spread them on the table like cards in a poker game. Mr. and Mrs. Carter, let me clarify the situation. William's estate has been restructured. The properties have been transferred to charitable trusts. The investments allocated to various causes, and to Daniel Carter. The only asset remaining in Bradley's name is the house in West Vancouver, signed over 3 years ago. Their lawyer leaned forward. We're contesting the will. Our client had reasonable expectation of inheritance. This is clearly undue influence. By whom? Marcus smiled coldly. William made these decisions independently, with full cognitive capacity, as certified by 3 separate physicians over the past month. He has documentation of your client's systematic financial abuse, isolation, and manipulation. Would you like me to present that evidence in court? Because I promise you, it won't look good. You can't do this, Jessica whispered, and I heard genuine fear in her voice. That money should be Bradley's. We're his. Family. Are you? I looked at her, really looked at her, because family doesn't forge signatures on documents. Family doesn't isolate elderly relatives from their friends. Family doesn't dump someone in a nursing home they can't afford, and then disappear. We were going to visit, Bradley said desperately. We were busy. You were at a winery, posting about kid-free weekends, while I sat alone in Meadowbrook waiting for you. I stood up. You know what the saddest part is? I would have given you everything, but you couldn't even give me basic human dignity. So this is revenge? Jessica's voice was shrill now. You're punishing us? No, Jessica. I'm protecting my legacy from people who see it as nothing more than numbers on a balance sheet. You still get the house? $3.2 million. That's more than most people see in 10 lifetimes. But the rest goes to people who will actually use it to help others. The Vancouver Food Bank will feed families. Cancer research will save lives. Affordable housing will give people shelter. Your stepson will get an education. And elderly people trapped in facilities they can't afford will have options. I walked toward the door. You wanted my money, but you never wanted me. Bradley followed me into the hallway. Dad, please, can we talk? Just us? I turned to face my son. What would you like to talk about, Bradley? How you chose your wife over your father? How you abandoned your own son because Jessica didn't like dealing with blended families? How you put me in that place and never looked back? I thought I was doing the right thing, his voice cracked. The right thing for whom? For me? Or for yourself? He had no answer. You could see it in his eyes. The moment someone realizes they can't justify what they've done, can't rewrite history to make themselves the hero. You know what really breaks my heart? I said quietly. Not the money, not the house, but that you became someone your mother wouldn't recognize. Eleanor died believing you'd take care of me, and you did, right up until it became inconvenient. I can change, Bradley said, and there were tears now, real ones. Dad, please, give me another chance. I thought about that, about second chances and redemption, about whether people could truly change or just pretend it until the next crisis. Maybe you can change, Bradley, But you'll prove it without my money funding your transformation. I walked away, leaving him in that hallway. Marcus drove me back to my hotel in silence. How do you feel? He finally asked as we pulled up to the entrance. Lighter, I said. For the first time in 3 years, I feel lighter. That weekend, Daniel came to visit. We spent Saturday at the Maritime Museum, looking at ship models, talking about his university plans. Sunday, we drove to Whistler, just talking, just being grandfather and grandson. Dad called me, Daniel said as we sat by the lake. He was crying, said you'd cut him out of your life. I gave him a $3.2 million house. That's not cutting him out. That's giving him exactly what he took from me. Do you think he'll ever understand? I watched sunlight dance on the water. Maybe, maybe not. But that's his journey now, not mine. 3 months later, I bought a small condo in Victoria, near Daniel and Rebecca. I volunteered at the Maritime Museum there, teaching kids about naval engineering. Thursday nights I played poker with retired engineers who knew nothing about my past. I lived simply, honestly, freely. Bradley called sometimes, awkward conversations where he tried to apologize without actually saying sorry. Tried to rebuild without acknowledging what he'd destroyed. I kept them short, polite, distant. Jessica never called. Last I heard, they'd sold the house for $2.8 million after the mortgage. Bought something smaller in Surrey. Jessica's Instagram showed fewer designer purchases, more posts about budgeting. Daniel thrived at UBC, studying naval architecture, working part-time at a yacht club, building the future Eleanor and I had dreamed for our family. One evening, sitting on my balcony watching the sunset over Victoria Harbor, my phone rang. Bradley. Dad? It's me? Hello, Bradley. I've been thinking about what you said, about Mom, about what she'd think of who I became. A long pause. I started therapy, marriage counseling, trying to figure out how I let this happen. That's good, son. That's a start. Is it too late for us? I thought about Eleanor, about what she'd want, about forgiveness and family and second chances. I don't know, Bradley, but maybe that's not the right question. Maybe the question is, who do you want to be going forward? We talked for an hour that night. Really talked. Not about money or houses or inheritance, but about life, choices, regrets, possibilities. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. Maybe not ever. But it was something. A crack in a door that had been welded shut. Sitting on my balcony watching the sun set over the harbor, I realized something important. I'd won. Not by keeping money from my son, but by refusing to let his choices destroy who I was. I was 65 years old, living in a small condo, volunteering at a museum, playing poker with friends who knew nothing about my wealth. I was just William, just myself, and that was more than enough. Eleanor used to say, the measure of a life wasn't what you accumulated, but what you left behind. Not money or property, but impact, hope, change. I'd left scholarships for kids who needed them, support for elderly people in impossible situations, cancer research funding, a future for my grandson, and a lesson for my son. People aren't disposable. Family means more than convenience. Some prices are too high, no matter what you're buying. As whether Bradley learned that lesson remained to be seen. But I'd done my part. My phone buzzed. A text from Daniel. Grandpa aced my naval architecture exam. Grandma would be so proud. I smiled. Typed back. She'd be incredibly proud. So am I. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky orange and gold. Somewhere across the water, my son was hopefully learning what truly mattered. But here, in my small condo with my simple life, I'd already found it. Dignity, purpose, and the knowledge that I'd protected Eleanor's legacy from people who saw it only as dollar signs. The money was gone. The houses transferred. The estate settled. But I was still here, still standing, still myself. And if you've ever had to choose between being rich and being respected, between wealth and dignity, you know which one lets you sleep at night. That was the greatest inheritance of all,